today. We did want to say just a quick thank you. So of course, thank you to all the folks at the CCCS Equity Symposium for bringing us together. And specifically, thank you to Stacy and Brittany. We also wanted to say thank you to CCA and the DEI division for supporting this work. And then of course, we wanted to say thank you to our wonderful multilingual learners for lending their voice and experiences that are included in this presentation today, so that we may all continue to learn and grow as educators. So we are the MLL Success Initiative, or team, MLL team for short. Our collective is comprised of a couple of educators from both ESL and English departments at CCA. And our team has been really working to increase equity, sense of belonging, and retention for MLLs across the college. So today we're going to get into just a little more detail about who our MLLs are. And then of course we want to begin to really unpack and understand the ways in which we can validate MLL strengths and really how we can identify and brainstorm ways to eliminate barriers currently impacting our MLLs in our classroom. So again, thank you for joining us today. My name is Racheal Aragon. I use she, her pronouns, and the rest of our team.
I'm Amanda Meier, also use she and her.
This is Ayse Durmus, also use she and her.
And I am Lena Karabushin, she, her, those are my pronouns.
Feel free to take it away, Lena.
All right, so let's go to the next slide. If you would like to participate in this language lesson, please mark a reaction with either hands up or that wave a reaction, and then I will include you in this lesson. Let's begin. Ласкаво просимо. Добрий день. Ayse, добрий день.
Добрий день, Lena.
Мене звуть Лена. Як вас звати?
Мене звуть Ayse.
Ага, дуже приємно, дуже приємно. Аманда, добрий день.
Добрий день.
Мене звуть Лена. Як вас звати?
Мене звуть Amanda.
Ага, приємно познайомитися. Дякую, дякую. Racheal, добрий день.
Добрий день.
Мене звуть Лена. Як вас звати?
Як вас звати? Мене звуть Racheal.
Ага, дякую, дуже приємно. Cynthia, добрий день.
Добрий день.
Мене звуть Лена. Як вас звати?
Мене звуть Cynthia.
Дякую, дуже приємно, дуже приємно. Let's see who else. Дякую, дякую. Дякую, Cynthia. Okay, thank you very much for participating in our language lesson. Any guesses what language you were just speaking or listening to?
And feel free to unmute or go ahead and put something in the chat as whatever is comfortable for you.
One guess is Polish. More guesses? What language? And you can either type it up or say it out loud. I see Russian. I want to see a few more guesses before I reveal the right answer. You guys are very close. Polish, Russian, something Slavic, Polish.
Something Slavic.
Something Hungarian. Okay, so I think you'll be delighted to know that you just learned a little bit in Ukrainian. So if you want to use this new knowledge, please go ahead. All right, did someone get it?
Yeah.
Oh, Ukrainian, yes, I missed that one. Thank you. Good job. So how did that lesson feel for those of you who spoke up, or maybe a reason why you didn't raise your hand to participate in this lesson? Cynthia, can I ask you first?
Sure. I think that even though I've been in a classroom when you've done this before, I thought I would be less nervous, and I was just nervous. but also excited. Like I was smiling. I was trying to listen to Racheal and Ayse and Amanda so I could like do a really good job.
That's right. And Vanessa wrote uncomfortable. Yes. And Amanda said that is valid. Yes. And so why do we do this lesson to begin with? Is to imagine yourself maybe as a multilingual student in a classroom, but of course, this is not probably even close, right, to the real authentic experience of being an MLL student in a mainstream culture classroom. So there you go. Dakuyu. And then Brittany said, I was so focused on the context clues. It was hard to concentrate on what you were saying. Yes, what a great observation. And hopefully something's helped you, right, to maybe with Ayse and Racheal, Amanda, and Cynthia, who did not prepare for this lesson ahead of time. So you had some visual help, right? So you had some auditory and visual, but as Brittany was saying, that was almost too much as well, right? Because you had so many different inputs coming in at the same time with something that is unfamiliar. Great, thank you very much.
Great. So before we kind of get too deep in the presentation, we wanted to give you a few terms and make sure we're all on the same page about who are multilingual learners. So most of us are probably familiar with the term ESL, English as a second language. I think all of our institutions probably use this term to talk about these students and the classes that are geared towards them. However, in reality, this term ESL is at best not accurate, and at worst, it's actually deficit-minded and inequitable. So we prefer the term multilingual learner. English isn't a second language for many of our students. In fact, it might be a third or a fourth language. A lot of our multilingual learners in community colleges are bilingual, which means they were growing up learning multiple languages at once. And so something that kind of sticks with me when I think about our students is that, a student asked, when do I stop being an English language learner? And when do I get to be an English language user? And I think that's something we want to think about with our students. And so this term MLL that we're going to use through this presentation, we think it's more asset-minded and we think it's more equitable. And we encourage you to start using this as well to talk about your students. So there's a couple of groups that kind of comprise this umbrella term of MLL. In general, we think of MLLs, a lot of our students are immigrant students. So they were born in other countries, immigrated here, refugees, asylum seekers, asylees, they all fall under this category of immigrant students. At CCA, as an example, it's crucial that we understand that they are a big group of our MLLs because their research shows that they have very specific challenges that other MLLs might not have. For example, refugee students have had interrupted schooling. They might be dealing with trauma that we have to think about in the classroom. Research on refugee students show that cultural adjustments, language, all of this can really result in non-completion of their studies, under preparation for the workforce and things like that. So knowing about this specific group of students can help us in our pedagogical decisions, our assignment design, and we're going to talk more about this as we continue in the presentation. The next group that kind of fits under this MLL umbrella is a group we call World English Speaking Students. So this group comprises a big group of students at CCA and probably other institutions as well. They speak English, but it might be a different version of English, one that's not typically privileged at higher ed institutions in the US. And so at CCA, a lot of our students who speak World English come from former British colonies, like Ghana, Nigeria, Pakistan, and they've been speaking English their whole lives. So to call them ESL students is actually, could be considered kind of offensive because they're not ESL students. So that's something to think about. The next group that might make up, or that make up MLLs that you might have at your institution are international students. And so these are students who are attending on student visas. They've probably had formal English instruction in their countries of origin, and they're intending to return home. So different from immigrant students in that way. And the final group that we'll discuss are Generation 1.5 students. And so you've probably heard this term before. They're students who were born in their country of origin, immigrated here as children. They've probably had at least part of their K-12 education here. And this group is really important to think about because there's a lot of research showing that they, sorry, lost my notes there. Research showing that they have less experience with rigorous academic coursework in high school because many of them are going through ELL or ESL programs. And in fact, a lot of the research shows that they, quote, come woefully unprepared into higher education. And so thinking about all of these different groups of MLLs, have you heard these terms before? Do you think about your students in this way? Can you identify, do you know the differences in your students in your classes? And one difference I like to point out here and why we want to think about this in our teaching is that they might learn differently because of how they have learned English and experienced English. So for example, a seminal study conducted by Reed identified linguistic differences and learning differences among MLLs. She identified two groups, those we might consider eye learners and those we might consider ear learners. So an eye learner are students who are orally fluent in their first language, and they've probably had formal schooling in their first language and in English as well. Students who are ear learners might not be literate in their first language, and they might have had informal instruction in English. So learning it, through conversation. Refugee students, a lot of immigrant students fall into this group. So like I mentioned, as we continue to discuss practices and strategies in this presentation, just kind of think about how the differences in these students can affect your pedagogical choices.
So thank you, Amanda. So I'm going to build on the research that we conducted as MLL team at CCA, and we would like to go on with some research and what the research or literature is offering us when we wanted to center, MLL students' voices in our classes and how we understand their experiences and their experiences with the content, the curricula, and the language in the classroom and the classroom culture, and how we can create more equitable spaces for them. And then the first thing in this framework came out as cultural responsive and affirming teaching. So if you want, we can define it, or CRT, we want to call it in short, can be defined as using cultural knowledge, right? And prior experiences of our students, frames of references, and performance styles of ethnically and linguistically diverse students to make learning encounters more relevant and effective for them. Quote, it teaches to and through the strengths of these students, quote, from Dr. Jennifer Gay. So CRT was coined by Dr. Lesson Billings in late 1990s, and from the beginning is asking us educators to reflect on our practices and cultures, the way that we create in the classrooms through equity-minded lenses, right? So this framework is about building awareness around culture and how this cultural orientations can differ for some of our students. These cultures, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable may vary, according to culture, but there are some common foci on relationships and cooperative learning stay the same. So to create more inclusive and equitable spaces for our MLLs, we need to adapt strategies that are relational, that humanize the learning and teaching environment for our students and provide opportunities for cooperation, collaboration, and construction of knowledge together. So CRT is also about reflection, right? And is becoming reflective educators. So it is important to note that, we have to acknowledge and understand our own sociopolitical position, and knowing how our own cultural lenses, culture of higher education, and the culture that is created in a class are experienced by our MLLs, and what impact these all create on their learning processes. Right. So validation of these collective wisdom that our students are bringing, belief that the group members take care of each other, and learning happens within group interaction and dialogue and conversation and or storytelling, and harmony and group dynamics are some of the features that CRT help us to serve our MLLs equitably. So as you see here, there's some principles of CRT that we would like to mention here to understand our MLL students' experiences. And one of them is, creating communities of learners. And it is asking us to create intellectually and socially safe environment for learning. And I want to mention the word safe later when we talk about combating the deficit discourse. And it is vital that we make these spaces for MLL student voice and agency through a classroom culture and learning around socio-cultural conversations and tasks that would validate their lived and shared experiences. Right. It's also about holding these students to high standards while offering them the new intellectual challenges and high and cultural affirming feedback with the support. Right. So this is this is also related. And when I'm looking at this list, I see that they're also interconnected to each other. There's no way that I can separate them from each other. So this is also bringing us another perspective, like defining the role of teaching or the role of teacher as a learning partner, right? Or calling it a partnership. So reimagining the student-teacher relationship as a partnership, supporting MLL students to take greater ownership of their own learning while seeing their skill set and expertise and linguistic repertoire as an asset, right? Establishing authentic connections and modalities, creating modalities for our MLL students to better demonstrate their knowledge and learning. So this could be through creating different modalities for assessment or any assignment or task. So it is, important for us to note that CRT, how it defines culture and how it defines it in a broader sense and multifaceted sense. So according to this definition, culture is like our software, and this is an analogy that Zaretta Hammond is using in her book, Brain and Cultural Responsive Teaching. It is like the core of our learning processes, right? The meaning and decision making. The culture is in the heart of how we shape our worldview and how we perceive the happenings around us and how we define things. So if we take culture from this stance, we need to understand, how culture impacts the brain and information making processes for our students. So we would like to go on with some examples and how we can put all this very short summary. I know that it couldn't be enough, but how we can put these into practice and how we can make sure that, we're validating their lived experiences and also their linguistic repertoire. How do you think it looks like in our classes? Some examples you would like to write in the chat or unmute yourselves.
Yes, so folks, as you look over those tenets on the left, when we're really thinking about CRT, do any examples from your own classrooms or ideas even about what activities or practices, lessons that we can guide as instructors, what might that actually look like when we're looking at these tenets on the left side there? So as Ayse said, if you feel comfortable, feel free to unmute yourself. If you're more comfortable, put an idea or two in the chat.
One example could be providing culturally relevant examples for the content and metaphors from students' communities, and creating some spaces for group work where students can learn from each other.
So I can volunteer an idea. I don't know if it's right or not. but I'm not currently teaching right now, but I am a librarian, and I work in the open educational resource space. That's my world. And so I think that the idea of open pedagogy, engaging with students creating their own content and engaging with the content of course materials, works really nicely with culturally responsive pedagogy as well. So students bringing in their own experiences and their own culture into the coursework, the assignments, the course content. I also really love the idea of students as authors. So, you know, my experience is not the same as theirs. So
That's an excellent example.
Yeah.
And I'm going to borrow it. Students as authors, I'm going to borrow it.
Why don't we work together? Because I have an authoring platform that I would love to work with you with.
Very cool. Yeah, I just threw that into the chat to kind of capture some of this conversation. I also noticed we got a couple of other answers in here. So sometimes having students bring in examples with meaning to them, explore our lessons and apply learning, encouraging the students to discuss their own experiences and talk about their own culture, student choice, student-led discussion, teaching, offering opportunities to work in groups or individuals. These are all things that I'm trying to work my way through. I give my my MLLs longer times in discussion classes because sometimes it takes the students longer to put their ideas into words and make their point. These are all wonderful, folks. These are wonderful.
And to add on that too, one thing that I've been doing, I teach nursing, and a lot of my MLLs really struggle to not only get it to English, but then also to get it to medical and healthcare terminology. So when we're doing these answers, you know, buzz in, chime in first, I tell my MLL students to answer in their native language. If they're trying to get in quickly, answer it first in your native language and then explain it to us. Because a lot of the times they're trying to figure out how to convert the words before they answer. And so if they answer first in their language, then they have that time. So that's one thing that I think has been helping engage my MLL students.
These are all great, folks. Yeah, that thinking time, right? The processing time. Yeah, these are wonderful.
Cynthia, would you mind elaborating on student choice? Or
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
yeah, we can.
I think that, so I teach composition, and I try to offer students like some options of like texts to write about, but then I also give them the option to find their own. Like if they're not connecting with those, they can go find their own and bring them in, show it to me. And then I might even offer that to the whole class. Like, hey, you know, your classmate found this. Does anybody else want to write about that as well? That's just one example.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing.
And I was thinking, Ayse, to really making it MLL specific, right? So when we think about cultural responsive and affirming teaching, sometimes it's easy to forget MLLs. And so here's a question for everyone to answer to themselves. Whether you have MLL students or not in your classes, how many of the voices they hear, maybe they're listening to TED Talks, maybe you have guest speakers come to class, whatever they're listening or watching, how many of those experts speak with an accent? So, you know, are you decentering, you know, neutral accent English? And are you considering people who speak with all sorts of accents, right? Not just neutral accents. Are you centering them as well? Because that's a great invitation and validation for your MLL students. I think we often forget, and normalizing that can be really life-changing for your students.
I'm glad that you mentioned it. And, you know, in a couple of minutes, when we do the case studies, you know, we're going to read from a student, hear from a student about his accent and how he's worried about it, and, you know, how it can impede the learning, that nervous, you know. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, Lena. Thank you. So I think we can move on with our examples. We brought some examples, specific examples for some departments, like opportunities to write in other languages, especially note taking. And as a bilingual person, this is what I would do, and I would appreciate, you know, the opportunities for such activity, like taking notes in Spanish, right? Eliciting and affirming different ways of getting to the same answer. As someone mentioned, you know, I think Amanda, you know, we are here validating their ways of learning and also, their background knowledge, right? Or assigning group work, group quizzes. So anyone from our team would like to talk about assigning group work or group quizzes specifically, or?
I think we should probably move on. I would love to talk about it.
Yeah, I forgot about the time. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. But yes, group quizzes, you can assign these, I think, in D2L as well as just in person, right? I've had some really effective group quizzes, especially some teaching opportunities for students as well as learning opportunities in those moments.
I know we have to move on, but I'll add one more thing. I think making group work explicit can also help demystify some of this for students, because different educational systems place different value on group work. What might be considered cheating, quote unquote cheating, in one educational context might be totally valid collaboration in another context. So if you explicitly want them to do group work, tell them. If you don't want them to work together, tell them. So I think if whatever we can do for that is helpful too.
Yeah. So I would like to start this this slide here with a quote from Dr. Geneva Gay too. Quote, learning to see, hear, and listen to students, especially when they speak without words, and engaging in active and functional partnerships with students and developing skills for culturally and linguistically learning and living, quote ends. So, in the framework that we came up, the other leg of this is combating the deficit discourse, right? Those inner assumptions about our students and how we feel, what we bring about them, in our internal reflection is also playing a huge role on how we interact with our MLL students, right? So combating deficit discourse is about shifting to asset-based thinking that puts the onus on us as educators to support our MLL students and with their intellectual capacity and create and identify safe classrooms through giving students, more opportunities for engaging with the curricula and the tasks and culturally harmonic ways of learning. So we need to be aware of cultural lenses that, influence our interpretation of our students' actions and responses in their own instructional styles. So we might be falling back on default programming that we need, to combat. So this is something that, we wanted to go on in this presentation with. So if we wanted to give some examples here, what comes to your minds?
Yeah, Brittany has a great comment, and she had it in there even before you stopped talking.
Okay.
Plagiarism. Yes, as a MLL Initiative Success Group, we talk about plagiarism or how to combat that deficit discourse of plagiarism all the time. And there's actually a different term for, there's a more of an asset-based term for it. Does anyone know it? For plagiarism. So we refer to it as textual borrowing. And it's because, oh, yay. Thank you. Oh, Racheal. I thought, Racheal, you got the right answer. Good job. And it's textual borrowing. Yeah. And it is because, we are aware, and we want other instructors to be aware of this notion that Brittany wrote about. Copyright laws and just the idea of borrowing ideas or even intellectual property varies so widely across cultures. But we punish our MLL students all the time, right? And I think once you switch the way, or you shift that perspective from cheating to this is such a complex process for our MLL students, right? Using outside sources, paraphrasing and citing sources. Yep. That, like Brittany said, I try not to fail my students for doing that. Because it is not a failure, right? When you do that for most of our MLL students. Great example.
I just want to give a time check to our team too. I think we have about 30 minutes, okay?
Okay. So let's move on then with some examples that we brought here. So this is from one of feedback on a writing assignment. So we wanted to, focus on or we wanted to focus on the content, but here, it's almost the opposite, where the focus is on the grammar, right? We would like to give feedback in a way that is meaningful and authentic to our students, but at the same time, how we are supporting them should be in, I think, CRT framework too. There's a question. And then another example from our group could be, stereotyping, of course. I love all African students, or all of my Asian students are great at math, or our Ethiopian students are so respectful, even though some of them could sound well-intentioned and positive, but it is still stereotyping. And, we have to acknowledge the fact that our students are not representative of anything, right? So
to acknowledge Linda's question in the chat about plagiarism, I think framing it in a way that we're not assuming the students quote unquote plagiarized on purpose can really help that. And I think having conversations with students when that happens in class is really important, right? Not immediately giving them a 0 and reporting them to academic integrity. That can be really, really problematic. But yeah, we're running short on time. Would love to talk more about this in the breakout rooms, actually, because this will come up in one of the examples we'll talk about in the breakouts. Yep.
So here are some couple of questions we want us to think about, right? You don't have to answer. What assumptions do we make about our MLLs, right? Where these assumptions come from, and how do we interrogate our assumptions about our students, MLL students? Yeah. So team, I'm asking you, do we want any answers or just move on? Okay, go ahead.
I think we have to move on. Yeah.
We'll be able to actually answer some of those as this next slide comes.
That's right. And so this slide is for us to apply what you just learned in the previous 2 slides. Thanks, Ayse. Before you go into breakout rooms and then you work on individual, case studies and listen to student voices and really analyze and analyze the students, but more analyze yourself. So here's Asal. She's a student in our class. On the right-hand side are our observations. And there's a quote from her. That's an actual student quote that we collected. So what we have observed about Asal is she doesn't raise her hand or volunteer to speak up in class a lot. She's often looking at her phone, and she takes a lot of notes during class. She does okay on tests. She gets mostly B's on average. Her written work is difficult to read. She comes to class 15 minutes late, and she already missed 2 classes. Her grade right now is C. And this is one thing that Asal has told us is, I wanted to study my lesson too, but when I finish studying, helping my kids, doing everything at home, I find myself, I need to sleep. I can't study good. So that's a quote from one of our CCA students. So looking at this, the first question we want you to answer is, just looking at this, what deficit-minded assumptions might be made about Asal? Because we all have deficit-minded assumptions. We almost, we start there and then we correct it, especially in the beginning of this process. So you could write down your answers in the chat or tell us that she's too busy to go to school. Mm-hmm. That it's her phone that's distracting her. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let's not correct these assumptions yet and just kind of just lay it out. And even further, right, Cynthia, that she probably doesn't care about this class because she's looking at her phone. Mm-hmm.
And I'll add one here too, to just kind of take us that one step further. Maybe we've heard colleagues say this as well. But if we know that the student is performing well on tests, but that homework or the written work is really difficult to read or understand, I think some folks might even assume that there might be some cheating or something going on with the testing, right? If those answers aren't matching in the same homework or written work style.
And that's what Brittany wrote. Someone else is helping her. Yes. And again, like helping, cheating, right? How are we looking? What are our assumptions? that she is shy / quiet, that she doesn't plan her time well. Anything else? Yeah, so disorganized, right? Maybe. Good. I think these are great. And so now, of course, the second question is, if she were your student, how might you address the situation to better support her? So now you get to apply those principles and framework of culturally affirming pedagogy, right? Teaching specific to multilingual students, not just everyone. What are some different ways you would look at this description, right? How would you see Asal and how would you support her? What do you think?
Maybe to pick on Cynthia a little bit, I think a lot of people see our students on their phones and think they don't care. They're not paying attention. They're on Facebook. But maybe they're not. How could we find out what actually is going on? You know, could she be looking up words? Could she be using a dictionary? Could she be using Google Translate? Yeah, like Jennifer said, invite her into a conversation about that.
That's right. And she could be Googling context knowledge, right? Because that could be a big one. Invite her into.
We have a hand raised by Aziz.
This Aziz. Yeah, I think here should be like can be two different approach, right? First, it's like a general. It's as an instructor. It's about how you providing access to you as an instructor for all your students. So what I usually do, I'm trying to spend in the beginning of each class, I spend time for small talk, which I believe it's very helpful because right after that small talk, it can be based on the topic. I teach economics, or it can be something different, but even that I always can see that students might contact me better when I have that small talk, informal small talk. The second, and then it can be giving them, I mean, for whole class, not specifically for example, for Asal or someone, giving them more time or time options to meet with me one-on-one. This two approach very helpful. It works in my classes, specifically with a student which we right now we can say as a multicultural or multilanguage student, right? Mm-hmm. So, and then specific to this case, it can be again, like we already highlighted several approaches, like talking to the student or giving them that time to meet one-on-one. It's sometimes very helpful when student can really, without your specific question, provide you their situation. Like here you have her quote about what's going on in her home, in their personal life, that we cannot take it, or we cannot learn about this during the class discussion, but providing them the opportunity for individual one-on-one meeting is sometimes help to understand what's going on in their life, or why they're distracting with the different stuff like phone or something like this. So, and then maybe you will change something in your approach, or maybe you will offer to these specific students something to be more successful in your class, or to be more to change their participation level in your class. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's really great. And looking at that first bullet point, right? So if someone is being quiet and not participant, there's one way to approach it. There's one way to say, okay, how do I make Asal speak up? right? Why is she not speaking up? Is she shy? Another question you could ask yourself is, have I created a classroom culture that invites ourselves specifically, not just everyone, to participate in the conversation, right? Did I create a setting that would work for her? So first, turn that conversation to ourselves before trying to fix the students or find at fault, right? Something at fault. That kind of shifting can be revolutionary, right? In the way you treat your MLL students and the way they succeed in your class.
And the other thing I think, Lena, is about that, what kind of participation we're centering. We have to create different modalities, different modes of participation, right? It doesn't have to be oral. Yeah.
Thank you.
And to wrap up, there were a couple of other really great suggestions in the chat, right? So help determine learning style for that particular student, especially where we began, thinking how we don't want to lump all MLL students together. So really fact finding about what that student needs. Thinking about connecting to support services or really just inquiring about support. Humanizing is such a great word to throw into this conversation too, right? Connecting and talking, and like Aziz was saying, really meeting one-on-one when we can, right? Inviting our students in. Yeah, I think, are we ready to move to breakout?
I think so.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so I think we have just shy of 15 minutes. We want to be pretty close to our time here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put folks in groups like 5 or 6 or whatever is comfortable with the number of people we have in the room. And we're just posted in the chat a link to a Jamboard. So if you want to go ahead and click on that, you can open that up now, but we'll send it off in the once you arrive to the breakout room as well. And so really pretty simple in here. We have a quick instruction page. Once you make it to the breakout room, unmute if you have that capacity, say hello. And then really what you're going to want to do is use those arrows that Amanda's pointing to right at the top here to advance to 3 different slides. And so we have here 3 different student quotes, MLL specific, and we have those 2 follow-up questions that we've really been working with, which is identifying some of those deficit-minded assumptions, and then really thinking through how can we support these students, right? The stickies are on the left side there. So if you click that little sticky note, it should appear. You can type in your answer, your group's answers, and post them to the page. And then we'll have, oh, sorry, go for it.
I was just saying you can also use text box if you
feel.
Yeah,
whatever's easy. Whatever's easy. This doesn't have to be very, whatever's easy. And so we'll have about 15 minutes for group discussion over those 3 student quotes. We'll come back, we'll share out, and we'll provide some final resources.
Just on a final note, can we have 4 per group? For people?
I think that's fine.
Yeah, I've set it up. So I'm going to open up the rooms now and we'll call y'all back in a few.
I think because I'm a co-host, I'm not being sent to a room. Is there a particular room that I can join one though myself? Is there a particular room that you want me to go to?
Maybe room 2.
C2. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I tried not to send you, but it made me send you.
No worries. I figured it was easier anyway, so I was like, but I just
it doesn't let you not send people before. Yeah, anyways, I didn't mean to send you all to those rooms.
I think that was okay. I was just like, here's the Jamboard. We'll come back and check in a little bit. I wanted to give them a
send it out again.
Recording at this point.
I paused it.
Okay, great. Okay.
I think I did.
Okay. How many people do we have?
Like about
20.
20.
Mhm. It's great for discussion.
For sure. There were 290 some people at that early session. Hello and welcome back.
Welcome back, everyone.
They still have 30 seconds technically to come back. So there must be some good discussion happening. But not enough time to get to that third one, I don't think. I think it was too fast.
About textual borrowing, yeah.
Yeah.
We were running low on time, so it's understandable. But some really great stuff in the first couple of slides, yeah.
Mhm.
All right, rooms are closed. They're coming back.
Beautiful.
Welcome back.
We're all here.
I believe so. All right, sorry.
All
Racheal,
right.
you want to
Oh,
wrap it
am I
up?
sorry? Is this
Yeah.
me? Can you pull it up though on your screen? Can you pull up the slides? Yeah. So welcome back, folks. Sorry. I know that was maybe a little bit more brief than we would have liked time, but it we're so glad that you folks had some really great conversations with these first few slides. So to just wrap up, we're going to actually just go around and read through some of the answers that came out as you were all discussing. And so thinking through, of course, we're kind of answering two questions here, so might kind of think through which one this might fit for, but what deficit-minded assumptions might be made, and then of course, how might we address the situation and support the students. So maybe assumptions like the student's not interested, does understand the material, so no questions, give opportunities to ask and respond various ways. Maybe the student's socially hesitant, not comfortable with the instructor, have the student write down questions on different sheet as the instructor, or excuse me, as the teacher reads those questions. So really thinking about a way to support. Could support by asking the student if they want more help speaking up in class. Give options of how to participate in class, quick write-ups. Work in one-on-one time with teacher and student so that she doesn't feel like she's the only one needing extra help. Yeah, to address confidence, give time for students to connect with each other, a bridge to at least one other classmate to talk to. So really starting to connect students to students for support. They aren't paying attention. They're refusing to participate in class discussions. They are needy after class time with teacher. These are great, folks. So really starting to think about identifying those deficit discourse minded assumptions so that we can really pause and pinpoint when these happen, when these come up, maybe in a colleague's class, your own class, but starting to think about how we can shift that thinking, right? Yeah, these are wonderful. Anybody else have anything to add? No? All right, this is our second one, right?
2 minutes, yeah, 2-minute warning.
Okay, yeah, for a 2-minute warning, maybe we'll go ahead and not share out the second one for now, but you all have access to that Jamboard still. So if you want to keep that up on your screen, feel free to peruse some of those other really great brainstormed ideas about how to support the students. But yeah, I think I'll hand it off.
Great. So just to wrap up, we have a quick exit ticket just that we'd like to ask you to kind of reflect on 2 questions. So we'll post that in the chat. We also have a link to additional resources that we've compiled for teaching multilingual students. So this is the exit ticket. Mostly just asking you to share an aha moment from today, and then also thinking about what could help you further the work in this MLL work as you go back to your institutions after today's training. And then the additional resources is a website where we've posted research, checklists, like things that you can do to kind of make sure your classes are MLL ready or supporting them. Yep. And then follow-up questions. I know we didn't get to answer all of the questions today, and there were some that we had to answer briefly, but if you did want to reach out and email us, or we actually have, it's a lot of links I'm putting in the chat, sorry. We actually have a parking lot for questions. So if you wanted to kind of add your question here anonymously, we might try to reach out and answer these as well, if we can. Yeah. I don't know, anything else? I want to respect everyone's time.
Yeah, so if you don't have time for the exit ticket, understandable, but definitely want to grab that resource link just for follow-up. There's just a tremendous amount of really great information that can be helpful. And then also, of course, thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciate your interest in this presentation, and of course, your interest in supporting your MLLs at your institution. So yeah, if you have any questions, if we can become a resource, we're happy to help.
Thank you.
Hang out for a few minutes, yeah.
And we're not kicking you out. So if anybody has questions,
we can hang out for a few minutes too. If folks want to hang out, we'll stop recording.
Okay, so how do we get a copy of your presentation?
We are sending it